Its rare chess game is played and instantly after receives high praise from players such as Hikaru and YouTubers such as Agad. In fact, the game played by Simon Williams, aka the Ginger GM, was so amazing, featuring such stunning sacrifices, Hikaru and Agad started calling it Game of the Year. And I think after you see for yourself, you're probably going to agree. Serie A was played in the Reykjavik Open in 2023, and let's just get started. So we have Simon Williams versus Anastasia Rakhmangalova, a very strong female player who is a Ukrainian women's international master. Simon just has the white pieces, begins d4 and d5. Very classical response. c4, typical of the queen's pawn game. c6, semi-Slav. C takes d5, c takes d5. And then Simon continues very naturally with knight to c3. Of course, you don't want to block your c-pawn, but with the c-pawn gone, it's very natural to put your knight there. We see knight to f6, defending the pawn, and f3. This is a very offbeat variation, but not a bad one. In fact, it's been around before, it's been played by lots of people, but after this game, I think we might start calling this the Simon variation, or the Williams line. So we see e6, defending, but the idea of this f3 move, even though your king is weakened a little bit, especially to the start with bishop, it allows you to quickly push e4. The f3 line is actually quite similar in a lot of these queen's pawn games, especially as like same-ish variation in them, so Indian or the king's Indian. So it's definitely not too outlandish a prospect to begin pushing the f-pawn in these queen's pawn game positions. We see e4, striking in the center, d captures, and f captures. Now we see Simon has this beautiful center, and he's ready to just get all his pieces out and use these open lines to attack that black king. Knight to c6, knight to f3, bishop to b4, just putting a pin on that knight, making sure that this e4 pawn is a little bit weaker. So of course Simon just defends that with the bishop. And now we see bishop to a5, just getting out of the way of any pins or anything, making sure his bishop can't be harassed too easily. And then Simon takes his time, picks his moment, e5, pushing in the center of the board. Now Anastasia has a bit of a problem. She has to decide, where does she want this knight to go? She decides to go knight d5, gallivanting into the middle of the board, now putting a bit more pressure on this pinned knight. So Simon could react to this in a multitude of ways. He could maybe try and push the knight away or defend the knight a little bit more. He does neither. He decides to castle straight away, setting the tone for this game. He's not going to care about material. He wants piece activity and just to get after that black king. So of course, she obliges with the sacrifice because after captures, Simon loses a pawn. Of course, not going to lose the rook as well, slides that over to b1. And now the rook is active, but not aiming at a too particular target. But again, not clear what black should do. These pieces are quite well coordinated. And if you notice, if black decides to just castle here, it fails to a Greek gift sacrifice. So here, knight g5 check. Of course, can't take because the bishop is defending. King's g8, queen h5. And the engine gives a little bit of defense for black. Queen takes d4, rook to f2, queen to d3. You can just take on f7 with the knight. And the best move is to capture with the rook. Black is still at 1 point of material, but I would not want to be playing this position with black with your king so exposed. The queen and the rook just being so strong. So of course, can't just castle here. You've got to have your wits about you. So Anastasia decides to continue with h6. Just sliding that pawn forward 1 square, lessens the effect of any Greek gift sacrifices. But now, Simon thinks, what is the most accurate and aggressive way I can develop my pieces? Well, he doesn't want to go lurching in too early without all his pieces in the game. And he decides to go bishop to a3. A great move in my opinion, because now that bishop just slices through the black position. It's going to be extremely hard to castle. I mean, you can maybe now drop that knight back, but with all these Greek gift issues and this bishop being very strong and this d3 to h7 diagonal, not sure you want to be getting your king involved in any of that sort of stuff. So Anastasia just goes a5, decides to grab a bit of space on the queen side, and Simon continues with queen to a4, putting a bit of pressure on this knight, just getting his queen out of the starting square in the most aggressive way he can. So he's inviting bishop to d7, which is played, and this has a discovery. So if this knight ever moves, maybe capturing a pawn like this, the queen would be hit, and the queen would be forced to move. So a little bit dangerous here. And Simon doesn't even care. He sees this pawn is under threat, and he has great attacking chance. He decides to take that pawn. Rook takes b7. Material is now equal. But Simon did not take this pawn for the material. No, far from that. He took this pawn because rooks in the 7th rank are just so strong. He thinks, if I can control the 7th rank here, I can really cut off the king's options, and maybe the consequence could be absolutely devastating. So of course, knight takes d4. Pawn is taken, hits the queen, and if you want to just capture back, of course you're going to lose your queen. And of course you can't just take the knight with the queen, because the bishop defends it. So Simon's at a bit of a crossroads. Where should he move his queen? Should he even move his queen? What should he do? Capture this back with the knight? Of course you can't do that, you'd hang your queen. So again, not so clear what Simon wants to do here. Well, he decides to play the most aggressive approach. He thinks, well, I don't really need that queen that much. He decides to go knight takes d4, sacrificing a full queen, just completely hanging it, because the positional compensations for black are absolutely stunning should that queen be captured. Of course, Anastasia goes bishop takes a4, grabs that queen, thinks, Simon, I don't know what the hell you're cooking up here, but doesn't seem that dangerous, and I'm going to take a free queen any day of the week. Simon continues with another brilliant move. Knight takes e6, and that knight can't even be captured. If you were to capture that knight, you immediately run into problems with bishop to g6 mate, this diagonal being so weak, and the rooks cutting off all of the escape squares. So that's a beautiful theme. So after knight takes g6, Anastasia continues queen to h4, because obviously you can't take that knight. She wants to get that queen out, start causing some background issues, because if you want to get this rook in the game, it can be getting a bit dicey. Again, Simon doesn't care. Rook takes f7. Now he's got both of these rooks teaming up on the 7th rank. I mean, you only seen this in the end game. We're only 19 moves into this game, and Simon's already threatening some sort of blind swine checkmate. In fact, he's threatening mate in 2 with rook e7, queen takes e7, and rook takes e7, being checkmate, defended by the bishop, and the knight cutting off these 2 squares in the end. So that would look like this. So let's say black plays a random move, maybe something like this, I don't know, and then you would checkmate like this. So here, 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 and the king is actually mated due to the knight and the rook just cutting off all these squares. And then Anastasia continues. She needs to defend that e7 square, so of course she decides to defend it another way. She goes bishop to b4. It doesn't hang a bishop, it's defended by the queen from the other side of the board. Quite a long distant defense. Anastasia has to stop this threat. There's no way to survive if you leave this e7 square undefended. She decides to defend it in one of the most practical ways she can. She goes bishop to b4, of course, defended by the queen, defending that square, just hoping for Simon to exchange. But if you've sacrificed this much material, you can't afford to hope and think that hopefully you can cook something up. Simon already calculated all of this, and he continues with rook to f8 check. Of course, defended by the knight, and this actually leads to checkmate in 2. And this rook is actually hanging 2 different ways. The bishop can capture, and the rook can capture. You're thinking, how the heck does these even work? Well, it's actually called a clearance sacrifice. So the only idea of moving this rook is he doesn't even care. He doesn't even need that rook anymore. That's why he sacrifices it. With check, it's even nicer. But he was just doing that to clear the road for this bishop on g6. If you want to capture that rook, just bishop g6 check, rook comes up, and you've got bishop to f7 checkmate with a knight cutting off all the squares on the back rank. So an absolutely beautiful finish to an amazing game. Very clear to see why people are already calling it Game of the Year. I think I'd have to agree. If you enjoyed that game, it'd help me a lot if you could subscribe or even like the video. I've got a lot more game content on my channel, so hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.